What were our biggest takeaways from Super Bowl 57? And is Quentin Johnston wide receiver one in this class? All that and more this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Magdziuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for tuning in. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online, available to people worldwide. They've got a special offer for our listeners. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. I am Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. She is Kate Magdziuk. Follow her on Twitter at Kate Magdziuk. Kate, Super Bowl 57 is in the books. Your biggest takeaway was?
Patrick Mahomes is so freaking good. I know it's the most basic takeaway in the world, but like even Patrick Mahomes on one ankle, still better than every other quarterback in the world with two ankles, period. Walked away with 131 passer rating, 3 touchdowns, didn't see a ton of yardage, but that's okay because what he didn't throw through the air, he ran for on his hobbly little ankle. He just finds ways to win, period, over and over again. That's my takeaway, but I know you have a different one, Marcus.
I mean, it's Isaiah Pacheco, right? Like we talked about this on Friday. Like, who is the one player that could see their dynasty stock rise the most? And for me, it was Pacheco. It was, hey, if he just comes in and dominates the running back touches and looks good doing it, I mean, we really don't have any reason to expect anything to change this offseason. And that's exactly what he did. To be honest, before we even get to the stats, the most important thing happened 90 minutes before kickoff, right? Clyde Edwards-Helaire he was on the active list. He practiced all week. He was off IR, and he was a healthy scratch. Didn't even play in this game. There were 19 rushing attempts by Chiefs running backs. Pacheco got 15 of them, 15 carries for 76 yards and a touchdown. Didn't do anything in the passing game, but I mean, he's locked in as Kansas City's running back going forward. I thought he looked fantastic last night.
100% looked amazing. And you're right. The biggest takeaway, perhaps for Pacheco, wasn't even what we saw on the field, though he had a great game. It definitely was the Clyde Edwards-Helaire healthy scratch that just catapulted him in terms of just value. Like, why is it? That is my biggest probably surprise. As I mentioned, that Clyde Edwards-Helaire was one of the players that I was watching for a potential bump in dynasty value, and we didn't even see him. That is not a ringing endorsement.
Yeah. It feels like to me, Kate, that the Chiefs will try to move Clyde Edwards-Helaire this offseason. Not because they have to, but I think they kind of want to do right by him. And it's just clear that he's not going to play a lot on this team. So maybe they trade him. Maybe they cut him. I wouldn't be surprised if they bring back Jerick McKinnon on a cheap contract. Sign somebody else, but it just doesn't feel like Clyde's coming back.
Here is a question for you though, Marcus, because I think the biggest concern, so now we know Pacheco's the guy, right? He's the guy. We're all in agreement there. We're all sold there. Like, what do we make of his lack of involvement as a receiver? Because that's sort of the next question for me in determining his upside long-term as a dynasty asset. And I mean, I'm a little bit worried about that lack of involvement. Jerick McKinnon did technically outsnap Pacheco in terms of offensive snap count. But that was, largely because of his involvement as a route runner. I worry a little bit about that limiting his upside long-term.
I understand the concerns. I also think this is a really hot take. Andy Reid's a good coach, and I don't think he wants to overwhelm his 7th round rookie running back. So one of the ways that rookie running backs tend to struggle is in pass protection, right? If you can't play in the passing game as a blocker, they don't really want you out there, right? So it feels like to me this is a way of kind of easing him in, just getting him touches. And then I've got a feeling Andy Reid and the coaches are really going to work with him as a pass blocker this offseason. And that's why you'll see some of the stuff go up, his targets and that stuff. I don't think he's going to be this big producer in the receiving game because frankly, Mahomes just doesn't throw to the running backs all that often. He just throws the ball further downfield. But if he can get to 25, 30 catches a season, it's fine.
All right. I think that's fine. We should probably also talk about some Eagles. I hear they also played a football game yesterday.
Honestly, I mean, listen, Jalen Hurts is a superstar. He had just a monster game, 70 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns, also 300 passing yards and a touchdown. I don't think you're moving him at all based on this game, even though he was awesome. Devontae Smith, 7 catches for 100 yards. AJ Brown, 6 for 96 and a touchdown. We kind of talked about this last week. Like, we know what these guys are. Maybe you shift them inside of a tier, but you're not moving them up or down or tier either way.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But Jalen Hurts, man, what an underrated game for him. I know it never happens. I think it's happened once in NFL history where the Super Bowl MVP comes out from the losing team. I honestly thought Jalen Hurts had a chance. 374 total yards, 4 total touchdowns, just an incredible performance. I think the other takeaway is Devonta Smith, AJ Brown, Dallas Goedert. That is such a good receiving core that this team really is going to be built to win in multiple ways for the years to come.
Yeah, I would also say Miles Sanders, pretty disappointing in this game. 7 carries for 16 yards, got a little bit banged up. He did score 2 touchdowns 2 weeks against the 49ers, but 11 for 42. We'll see. He's going to have a very interesting free agency coming up. I've got a feeling Philly's probably not going to bring him back considering their cap situation. So certainly a player to monitor as we go forward. Kate, let's talk about Quentin Johnston, wide receiver from TCU. And I want to know if you think he is wide receiver 1 in this class. Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. When you're at your best, you can do great things. But sometimes life gets you bogged down and you may feel overwhelmed or not showing up in the way that you want to. Working with a therapist can help you get closer to the best version of you because when you feel empowered, you're more prepared to take on everything life has to throw at you. If you're thinking of giving therapy a try, BetterHelp is a fantastic option. It's convenient, it's flexible, it's affordable. Best of all, entirely available online. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for any reason with no additional charge. If you want to live a more empowered life, therapy can help you get there. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That is betterhelp.com/lockedon. Okay, today we are talking about TCU wide receiver Quentin Johnston, who we both had a chance to study and watch over the weekend. So just right off the top, what do you think of him as a player?
I think he's got a lot of really, really exciting traits that are going to make him probably a top 10 pick easy in the 2023 NFL draft. 6'4", 215 pounds. He's literally the picture of like if you could build a perfect wide receiver. 21 years old, plays primarily on the outside. But what's beautiful about Quentin Johnston is the fact that he's got this size, but he definitely doesn't look like he plays at that size. He's much smoother than you might anticipate for a guy who's 6'4", 215 pounds. There's a lot to like. There's a lot of athleticism. There's a lot of tools. I think he could use some refinement, but you've got to be very excited about his yards after the catch ability, ranked 9th in yards per route run. He's just a great player. My biggest knock on him so far in my evaluation is like I said, he doesn't look and move like a guy that's as big as he is. It doesn't always feel like he plays quite as big as he is. I want to see him establish a little bit more dominance at the catch point. I want to see him look more physical at the catch point, because that was like my biggest thing that I was kind of left wanting while I watched
So
this tape.
we have the NFL Combine, I believe, happening 2 weeks from today is the first day that it kicks off. I think wide receivers run a little bit later in the week, but, uh, Kate, my guys around the league that have been out to TCU and have seen him run, they're expecting him to run in the high 4.3s, maybe low 4.4s, but like I think 4.40 is kind of the number we're looking at here. So you mentioned the speed, like we just don't get players very often this size, with this weight and with that 40 time. I want to shout out Pro Football Focus, Mike Renner. I was reading his draft guide this morning, and the comp that he gave Johnston was actually Martavis Bryant, who had a very similar build and speed, right? Not the most refined receiver, but somebody just that has this elite blend of athleticism that we just don't get very often. So, uh, you mentioned that you think he's going to be a top 10 pick. Do you think he's going to be the first receiver off the board just because of the athletic traits?
I could easily see that, because we know I mean, if you're confident in your coaching staff and your ability to develop those traits, you know you're going to get a guy that's going to be very long for the NFL, as long as he follows the right trajectory.
Yep.
And I think, Marcus, there are a lot of interesting teams sort of in that range where he might be drafted. Whether that be, I kind of think that the Detroit Lions are an interesting fit,
Mm.
which many people probably, you might be sold on Amon-Ra St. Brown, but imagine St. Brown out of the slot and a guy like Quentin Johnston playing on the outside. You've already got, I think they're pretty confident in Jared Goff moving forward. I would love to see this dude with the Detroit Lions. They have the Rams pick at number 6 overall. That feels like the appropriate range. And again, like, he's got the traits. I know we have Jamison Williams. This could be a absolute, like, dangerous pass attack.
I will say, looking at the top 20 of the first round, there's not a lot of fits that I absolutely love. Let's just run through them really quickly, because I think when you go through, you mentioned Detroit, but you go through some of these names and it's not all that appealing. Atlanta at 8. I would not love that.
Houston at 12.
Depends on who the quarterback is, but yes, Tennessee at 11.
Um,
New
he
England at
feels
14.
he feels like I don't think I'd like to see him with the Titans, just given Treylon Burks. I feel like they kind of already have this guy that maybe needs a little bit of refinement, has size. Um,
Here's my prediction. I know it's in February. Here's what I think is going to happen. You look at some of these teams, and I don't think he fits necessarily what New England wants to do. I think there's a couple other receivers in this draft that make sense. And the Jets obviously aren't going to draft him because of what they have at receiver. I'm looking at the teams that are drafting in like the low 20s that have a big deficiency at wide receiver or need some speed. For example, the Chargers at 22, the Ravens at 23, the Giants at 26, even the Bills at 28. I've got a feeling with the wide receiver free agent market just not being great, you are going to see one of those teams or a team like that move up to get Johnson, because that speed is just so coveted.
It's coveted, and again, it's the traits. If you have a team that can develop those traits, I kind of like Baltimore. If we're looking in at teams in that sort of range to trade up, imagine if they do go out, they pay Lamar Jackson. Obviously, you have Rashad Bateman, who we haven't seen fully healthy yet, with the opportunity, but pairing, a newly paid Lamar Jackson with a first round rookie wide receiver, help compensate maybe for some of the contract that you're going to be paying up. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities, Marcus. And I don't know. I still want to see him go to the Detroit Lions, make a splash, my friends. I think this would be the most insane pass attack that we could ever imagine in the history of the universe if we had Jamison Williams, Quentin Johnston, and Amon-Ra St. Brown and ride it off into the sunset. I know it doesn't fit what they want to do because they're defensive, they run the ball, but it would just be so delicious.
I want him with the Chargers. That's the fit for me because Justin Herbert's not had a receiver like this, that he can just throw the ball down the field. Mike Williams is a downfield threat, but he's a different type, right? He's really more of the contested catch guy. Would love to see him land with Justin Herbert out in LA. I want to talk about his current dynasty value and where Quentin Johnston ranks among other rookie receivers right now. More on that in just a second. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to the highest point scores to the number of three-pointers drained in a game. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss this chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Okay, let's talk about Johnston's dynasty value right now, because on Dynasty League Football, he's currently being drafted as wide receiver 3 in rookie drafts, 5th overall behind Bijan Robinson, Jamar Gibbs, Jackson Smith and Jigba from Ohio State, and then Jordan Addison from USC. Do you agree with that?
I think it's pretty fair. I think what we're trading off here for some of the refinement that a Jordan Addison offers, even though maybe we're sacrificing a little bit of that size. I think it's kind of at a point where you're trading off maybe those little things we're getting a little nitpicky about, right? For the traits.
Yeah.
It feels like, it
just feels like those guys have such higher floors, right? And then
that's the best way to say it, a higher floor. Thank you.
Yeah.
Because
to me, we're going to get to Addison and Jackson Smith and Jigba, but those guys feel more and more like they have the Chris Olave floor, where they can go into any offense and be 900-yard receivers, right? But I think there's a chance that Johnston could go to a team like Tennessee, right, who needs wide receiver help, and is a 600-yard receiver one year, a 700-yard receiver the next year, and it's tough. I just don't see the floor. So I'm okay ranking him at wide receiver 3 right now until we learn where he ends up.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think, again, going back to what you just said, because I think that's the perfect description. The floor doesn't feel as high, but I do think out of this class, he might, just based on traits, athletic profile, speed, landing in the right situation, he might have the highest ceiling.
Right, because if you told me the Chargers traded up and drafted him at like 13, I mean, he'd be pretty clearly my wide receiver 1. But if he lands in Tennessee, we might be talking about him further down the board. So we love Johnson. We love the athletic traits. I do think the landing spot, much like Treylon Burks last year, is going to matter, right? I mean, because Burks was a very simple player, didn't have the top end athleticism, but you were just a little bit worried about where he was going to land.
Yeah, I think landing spot is going to be extremely pivotal, more so for Johnston than it will be for a guy like Addison or Smith and Jigba. I think interesting receiving class.
Yes.
I'm still in the beginning of my scouting process, and I'm I'm very intrigued, Marcus.
So
This is an interesting group.
just really quickly before we head out, I know I've got a startup draft that's coming up with rookies included, so that you draft them wherever you want to. Let's rank Johnston where you think he would become in at receivers. Treylon Burks, currently wide receiver 20. Would you rather have Johnston or Burks?
I'll take Burks.
Okay.
But
George
it's
Pickens,
close.
wide. Yeah. Sorry. Burks, wide receiver 20. I think I agree with you. George Pickens, wide receiver 24.
Oof. Oof. I'll still go with Pickens.
I agree. Christian Watson, wide receiver 26.
This is where the line blurs for me. I think I might roll Johnston there.
See, I would go Watson there, but I agree it's close. A couple names right behind him. Jamison Williams, wide receiver 27. Brandon Ayuk, wide receiver 28. I think I would take both those players over Johnston.
Same. Yeah, I think right on the money there.
Next group
So
of guys.
our only point of differentiation so far has been Christian Watson. But
Yep.
I think for that,
I think for me, it's that next group of guys, right? It's the Deontay Johnsons, the Amari Coopers, the Mike Evans, Jahan Dotsons, Christian Kirk. That's the spot for me that I would be willing to take Johnson. I as much as I like Kirk and I like Deontay Johnson, I think I would gamble on the upside there. Would you take Johnston over Kirk, Dotson, Bateman?
yes, all of the
Okay.
above. Again, comes down to that upside. That feels like the kind of range where we hit that tipping point of, yes, we're not getting the safety of a floor perhaps for a Christian Kirk, but it still does feel like the traits and athleticism in the right situation that that gives him a little bit of upside there.
Yeah. So very roughly, we're looking at like wide receiver 30-ish right now, around
Yeah,
there.
that
Yeah.
feels
Feels about
fair.
right, and that can move up or down depending on the landing spot.
For sure. And like, let's be honest, with a player with that kind of upside, wide receiver 30 feels like a really great deal for the potential ceiling we could be unlocking here.
All right, that is it for today's show. Thank you guys for tuning in. Go check out the show on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Matt and Ryan will be back on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday to continue some rookie profiles. Again, we're going to be like in a sprint until we get to the combine here in 2 weeks. And then we've got pro days coming up and free agency in the draft. So while the NFL season officially ended last night, there's no offseason in Dynasty football. So we'll be here the rest of the way. Go follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Magdziuk. I am at Marcus _Mosher. Enjoy your Monday. We'll see you guys next time.